As for those of you who maybe missed out on our first session together, the title of this series is Conquering the Crave. And we've been asking different questions about this. The first question I asked was why we would want to conquer the crave, because I believe you need a strong why. You need to know your why. If you don't know your why, then I think that it's going to be a lot easier to just kind of give up and fizzle out and, choose something else after a while, because why not, right? Why would we want to conquer the crave? Why not just live like we want and eat like we want and do what we want and relax and be lazy naturally and this kind of thing? Why would we conquer? Why would we want to, put up the fight? So we've been looking at the reasons why. And the first one we listened was a healthy body. The second reason was actually a true path to happiness. The third one was a balanced mind. And this last one, a stronger spirit. 1 Peter 2:11, dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. Now, you're not going to find the word crave in the Bible, but you will find lusts, and I will suggest that it's synonymous. And there's a lot of other words that I think are synonymous with the word crave. So these are craves, or are crave singular, which wars against the soul potentially. Christ knew that in order to successfully carry forward the plan of salvation, he must commence the work of redeeming man just where the ruin began. Adam fell by the indulgence of appetite. Christ began his work of redemption by reforming the physical habits of man. The declension in virtue and the degeneracy of the race are chiefly attributable to the indulgence of perverted appetite. Wow. That's a big statement, isn't it? And I think sometimes when we think about crave, we might think of cravings, or we might say, I'm a chocoholic, ha ha ha, which is part admittance, part denial that it's not really a big deal or anything like that. And I'm definitely not wanting to pick on chocolate, although that is the most common craving for women. That this crave is, I would like to say it's deeper. Think about, like James mentioned, the verse about the sin that's so easily beset us. That kind of habitual sin that we might tend to, that's really become a habit for us. And it's different than someone else's. Some have absolutely, it seems like, no problem with appetite. They can say no thank you to the dessert. They happily eat the kale salad. They say, no, I don't want seconds. It just seems so easy for them, and other people struggle in that area. But I would like to suggest that we all have a crave, and you will see more what I mean by that later. So when the enemy comes and seeks to attack us in this point of appetite, I think it's because he knows that it's one of the significant cogs in our wheel, that it's just a crucial component of who we are that can set off other components of who we are, whether that's mentally or, as we're talking about here, spiritually. And so what a beautiful truth that he who cherishes the light which God has given him upon health reform has an important aid in the work of becoming sanctified through the truth and fitted for immortality. But if he disregards that light and lives in violation of natural law, he pays the penalty, and his spiritual powers are benumbed. So what do we say when something is aiding you? When you have an aid, what is that?
Enabler.
Pardon me?
Enabler.
An enabler? When I think of enabler, I kind of have a negative kind of connotation, and maybe even more powerful than an enabler. Maybe enabler would be good if we thought of it in a positive way. To do good, right. Yes, it's helping us. It's supporting us. I see what you're saying. It's enabling us to be able to maybe live more triumphantly and live in a stronger spiritual platform, actually. Now, I really believe we need to see these statements, though, through the gospel lens, because I think it's really easy to read these kinds of things in a more legalistic approach. But Satan sees that he does not have so great power over minds when appetite is kept under control as when it is indulged. And so he's constantly working to lead men to indulgence. And we just need to be aware of that. There's something that's always trying to encourage me to indulgence, to my crave. And why? Because it's going to be a weak link. that can be that cog that kind of sets off everything else in my experience. And because I think that the crave is much deeper, again, than just our behaviors. Intemperance lies at the foundation of moral depravity of the world. By indulgence of appetite, man loses his power to resist temptation. It's incredible. We have a roaring lion who's after us, and he's not just roaring loudly. When you see lions and how they capture, they kind of stalk, right? They're quiet and they're stalking around, and that's kind of what we've got going on with the roaring lion in our lives. So God presents the results of unrestrained indulgence of appetite, and the moral powers are enfeebled, so that sin does not appear sinful. So again, these are just statements that are trying to help us become aware of the significance and the why. Why would I want to resist the crave? Why would I want to conquer it? It can be such an aid on one hand, or it can really pull me down on the other in multiple ways. So you see this not only in our generation, but throughout ever since there have been humans, this has existed. And with the children of Israel, God was seeking to deliver them from this, and it's really interesting how he went about it with food. Behold, God says, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them. Why would God want to test them with food? And what did he mean by quota? Was this like portion control? Is that what he was talking about? Why would God want to test us with food? What is the purpose of tests? See where we're at, build our faith. What did you say over here? In my life, I hate to admit this, but I've learned so much from my failures. I've learned so much from the mistakes I've made. And even when I take a test, right, what do I remember? The ones I got wrong. Not so much the ones that I got right, but the ones that I got wrong, and I had to go back, and I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that on the test. And so thankfully, God gives us these tests, and we realize, I don't know that. I don't know how. I'm not as strong, or this is, self-revelation to me type of thing. So God gives us a test, and these tests reveal ourselves to us. This is kind of interesting, though, that the children of Israel were addicted. And in the spirit of prophecy, she says they were addicted to licentiousness, to idolatry, to gluttony, and to gross vices. So the children of Israel had addictive problems. They were in the thraldom of addiction, and God was trying to set them free. And his path of freedom from addiction, I think, again, if we kind of looked at what he was doing with the children of Israel through the wilderness there, we could gain some clues for our own addictions. My daughter has told me, because I told you guys I do weight loss classes, or I try to help people with their food, they call them food issues. People will tell me, I've got a food issue. So try to help people with their food issues. And she said, Mom, you can't talk to people about this because you're not coming from a place where you can relate. She's talking about my weight, right? But I want to encourage you guys, this is not a weight issue. This is a worship issue. This is, what is food to me? And does it take the place in my life that is unhealthy? Like, really, it wasn't designed to fill this place in my life. Food, when I'm bored, it becomes my friend. Yeah? People tell me all the time, I eat because I'm bored. And so now I have company. Now I have something to do. Now I have something that's picking me up. When I'm lonely, my friend again, right? When I want entertainment, food is there. When I want to celebrate, I celebrate with food. When I'm down and depressed, what's going to pick me up? Food becomes my antidepressant. When I'm anxious, food becomes my anxiolytic. And do you see what I'm saying? So we have these issues with food that become very, thank you. Thank you very much. This relationship with food, and when we talk about relationship with food, a relationship is usually two people meaning something to each other, right? Do I mean anything to food? No, food could care less about me, right? But I still have a relationship with it because I have needs. I have big needs. And food is helping to supply those needs in my life. Do you see where I'm going with the worship issue? God says he's going to supply all my needs, but when I don't feel that way in the moment, sometimes I replace it with food. Food becomes the answer to my needs. So this worship issue, like I said, from the very beginning, it was a worship issue with Eve. It was a worship issue with Esau. And we developed this complicated relationship with food, where it took on this new place in relation to what it was to us, right? This new relationship. I'm sure you guys have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in the psychology realm, it's kind of like teachers use it and they say, wow, this student is having a really difficult time learning algebra. Why is this student having such a challenging time? Is it really that they're dumb or, whatever? Well, maybe they didn't eat breakfast that morning, or maybe their emotional needs aren't being met. And so this kind of hierarchy of needs says that we have these basic needs, and when we have these basic needs met, then we can ascend to the next level and to the next level and to the next level. And it's not always sequential, but I still think this is really fascinating, because I think God was using this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, even though it didn't exist then, to say, hey, will you trust me with the basics? Can you trust me with food? Can you walk out into a wilderness where there is nothing and nobody, there's no grocery store, there's no fast food restaurant, can you trust me to provide for you in the wilderness? That takes a lot of trust. That takes a lot of belief, a lot of faith. And so here we see in this, Maslow's hierarchy, food, breathing, water, sleep, security, family, relationships. Then we develop into more self-esteem and self-respect. And then that little zenith part of the triangle is, I love these words that they put in there, and I probably can't see it necessarily because it's a hot summer day and it's really bright in here. But in that little top triangle, it's talking about like what's the word we used earlier today? Not the zenith, but started with the C. The height we were looking at, it's not close. It'll come to me. It's talking about when do you guys feel spontaneous? In my family, I'm not the funniest one, but every once in a while, if you really find me in a comfortable, I'm just letting loose, I can be funny. And my family thinks, oh my goodness, mom's being funny. Usually they're the ones that are cracking the jokes, or they're making fun of me, and that's funny. But, spontaneity, when do you feel like you can completely be yourself? Like, have you ever been in an environment where everybody in the room, adored you, and you were just felt like so comfortable and so relaxed? To me, that is how I think of grace. That's what I think of when I think of heaven. Grace is always defined as God's unmerited favor, or his, the power that he gives to us and how it's manifestation in the life and that sort of thing. So, but anyway, just picture that grace is, I love you, I dig you, you're amazing, you're mine, and you can be totally who you are with me. And do you know what I'm saying? That kind of relationship. And hopefully you have that with your spouse and in your family as well. And then wouldn't it be amazing if that's what church was for us? And wouldn't it be amazing if other people entered into that environment and said, wow, you guys really have this, incredible dynamic here, where again, you're free to be yourselves. And yet most of the time, sadly, church is a place where we feel judged. Or anyway, this whole process though of self-actualization, spontaneity, creativity, morality, being the best version of ourselves. Here it is in a different setting where they just say, physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, esteem needs, self-actualization. But where's the food, God? You're leading me out into the wilderness. I can't trust you. And now you're only going to give us manna? I really can't trust you now, because I just came from where we had onions and garlic and melons and leeks. And do you know what I'm saying? We had some good tasting stuff. They weren't lusting they lusted after some things that weren't good for them, but they were lusting after things that we would say, yeah, that's good for you. And I guess one of the points that I want to make is that when we think of the crave, rather than thinking of, the potato chip is bad, oh, that hot fudge sundae is bad. Oh, those Skittles, those are bad. The cocaine, that's bad. No, the crave is something a lot deeper. The crave, we're talking about something that's in our nature. Psalm 78:17-19, but they sinned even more against him by rebelling against the Most High in the wilderness, and they tempted God in their heart by asking for the food of their fancy. Yes, they spoke against God, and they said, can God prepare a table in the wilderness? How do we tempt God? I thought the Bible says that God couldn't be tempted. But they tempted God. So I kind of did this study on this word, and this is what I came up with, that when we tempt God, we're relating to him with doubt, unbelief, and suspicion. You really don't have my best interest. I really can't trust you. This really isn't, the path to happiness or fulfillment or good health, etc. So I don't believe you, and so I'm going to complain, or I'm going to not follow and be obedient. And like I said, these were the things that they were craving. This was what they were craving. And we'd look at that and we'd be like, wow, those are healthy, good foods in comparison to what we crave today. 97% of Americans are seized with strong and specific urges to indulge. And like I mentioned to you, the majority for women is chocolate. Probably for men, it'd be more along the lines of something like meat. So, I wanted to share this with you. In John 6:6, here again we see this interesting use of the word testing in relation to food. A great crowd is coming toward Jesus, and he says to Philip, where shall we buy bread that these may eat? But this he said to test them. He wanted to test them, for he himself knew what he would do. So here again we see God using food to test us, to reveal to us our unbelief, our doubt. Because again, if I can't trust God with that bottom layer, how can I trust him with my security and relationally, and to actually lead me to, again, the best version of myself and to the experience that I want to have in this life? Basic needs. So now we're at the what. That was just the why, right? Why would we want to conquer the crave? But what is the crave? And I've already suggested to you guys that the crave is more than the actual, the foods, right? Things, or it doesn't have to be anything to do with food. What do we lust after in relationships, or with power, or in position, or, whatever the context is? The Bible says that the flesh and the crave, it uses different words to that I think are synonymous with this. So appetite, lusts, the law of sin and death, and we'll look at that tomorrow. Our carnal nature, that the crave is deeper. And this is why I think that Jesus didn't have to be tempted with chocolate, chips, or cocaine. He didn't need those specific kinds of temptations because he was dealing with the root of the problem, right? The root of the problem wasn't the item so much as it was what's within me, the crave that's within me, the lust that's within me, the carnal nature, and so forth. I think we're also fighting misinformation and ignorance. So sometimes we just believe things because that's what we hear, and that's what we're educated in, and that's what seems to be the prevailing thought. And thankfully, it's been just amazing to me how God, a long time ago gave us so much information that we're seeing with greater accuracy. And all this time we could be trusting it and building on it. And what if we built our healthcare system on that? We would be like cutting edge. People would be looking to us. When I think about I just recently read a book about our educational system in terms of Spalding and McGann, and what they envisioned in terms of our young people not even needing degrees. They would just be so head and tails above everyone else in terms of what they could produce or how they could provide services to people, that it would be like, you're going to get supreme excellent care, top notch if you go to this Adventist sanitarium. They don't need, the MD necessarily behind their name. They knew they got the education. Just kind of amazing to me, though, that even today we are blessed with this information that can counter so much misinformation in our society. And I think our environment and culture are more powerful than we think. What is the number one diet, you think, approach that's out there today? Anyone have a word?
Pills.
Okay, how about diet though, like a composition? Keto, thank you. Keto, it's our culture. Paleo, that is our culture. There's parts of it that you're like, that makes sense. And if you follow a keto diet versus a standard American diet, I would say you're doing better, right? That's a step in the right direction potentially. But it's still not the best. We have something better. But our environment and our culture has just sucked it in, like that is the way to go if you want to be healthy. So this is something that we are fighting, I guess, as well. Just, the cues that are coming in. And I'm sure some of you have experienced when you made changes and you started living healthier, that people questioned you, right? Are you really doing the right thing? And so we have to understand what we're fighting in order to be able to answer these people and their questions. So when do we fight the crave? When should we start doing battle with the crave? I think that it's different for different people. And there's reasons for that. I think that there's a lot of people who start fighting the crave early in their life because of the various reasons why that we discussed. But for many people, like we talked about, we think we're healthier than we are. And so it takes the extreme pain in our chest and, I had a heart attack, or I got a diagnosis, or, right? Sometimes it takes us to get to that point where we're finally willing to say, okay, I need to change. I need to make changes in my life to actually fight the crave. So sometimes that happens. It's interesting, she says in the Spirit of Prophecy, that people will start living healthily even before coming to Christ. They'll do it out of selfish motives, but it's good for them because it places their mind where they're more receptive to spiritual truth. So that's a cool thing. For other people, they wait till post-conversion because then the Spirit of God maybe starts knocking on their door saying, hey, this is an area where you don't trust me. You haven't surrendered to me in this area of your life. You're still looking to food as your antidepressant, as your comforter, as, right, all those, that relationship that's not healthy with food. So, where does it fit in? There's where the death scare kind of, well, for some people, it becomes their answer, their hope. Other people approach it more on prevention. And again, I'd like to suggest to us today that there's something even more amazing for us. Even if you are super healthy and you're exercising and you have no symptoms, that this is really worth tackling in our lives because, again, the crave is deep within us and we feel it manifest itself in other areas. Where can we practice this battle of conquering the crave? And I would like to suggest that we can do it anywhere and everywhere if we're willing to be and to allow it to be adaptable. That I really believe that our health message can be adaptable to any situation that you may find yourselves in. And the reason why is because I no longer look at it. Remember I told you guys earlier this morning that this is health reform, and it's just got these really strong parameters and they're inflexible. And yet I read this statement, thankfully, in my experience, that kind of started growing me in this area. We don't make the health reform an iron bedstead, cutting people off or stretching them to fit it. One person cannot be a standard for everybody else. What we want is a little sprinkling of good common sense. Don't be extremists. And I will share with you, this is just observational. I don't have any proof of this, but I think that when we are extremists in our lifestyle, we start developing these imbalanced tendencies mentally. And so I think it's important that we're just like, hey, am I walking this? And I think other people can help us. Other people sometimes see us more clearly than we see ourselves. Am I being balanced in this experience? Don't be extremists. If you err, it would be better to err on the side of the people than on the side where you cannot reach them. Do not be peculiar for the sake of being peculiar. Oh, and then in the context of this, she says, away with cake. Persons may kill themselves with too many sweets. So, while she was advocating and encouraging people to be healthy, right, it was always in this context of balance and understanding that it can be adaptable. And something else that really helped me understand how we could apply it when we're traveling, when we're at work, when we're eating with people who don't eat the same way we eat, etc., was some of her example. Back then, she would travel and she would do the best that she could while she was traveling. And then she'd hear rumors. Oh, Ellen White teaches not to eat cheese, but she eats cheese. And she was like, it's not like I'm eating, I just was traveling. That was the best thing that I had to eat in the moment, right? And so all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is this picture of what healthy living looks like, takes on a little bit more fluid, adaptable to any situation that we're in, and not allowances, but just adaptability. Does that make sense? Have you guys experienced any of those extremes in your life, in your experience? Yeah, so you kind of know where I'm going and what I'm talking about.
So it's okay to eat something bad rather than not eat something at all?
That's a good question. So I always deal with like these parameters, right, that we want to walk. Because most of the time what I see is people who are living in a way that is promoting.
Because Jesus didn't eat for 40 days. Ellen White could have chose not to eat the cheese for a day, I would think, right?
Yeah, potentially, but she was in a situation where she was hungry and she did. Right. But did that make or break her experience or her health? No. So there's some interesting concepts about, and that may not be for you. We have, and that may not be for me. We have so many options today, right? We can't hardly relate. You guys live near Portland, the foodie capital of, America almost. At least, that's what it was known for. So many options of food, and yet if you didn't have it, and I'm not trying to, I hate those analogies where they're like, oh, if you were on a deserted island and you only had a can of pork, would you eat it? I don't believe in that kind of stuff. That's not where I'm going. And honestly, I believe that we should be people of high rectitude. These are my principles and I stick to them. This is how I live with my life. Totally into that. But I guess there's another extreme, right? So, and the majority of the people that I see are always making allowances for their choices that aren't healthy for them. And that, I think, stems from the crave. It's really not, it's the crave acting out, right? But then over here is another extreme that I guess I feel like this applies to. One extreme versus the other. Are we cutting people off or stretching them to fit it? What's our approach? And
that says you're okay to fall into temptation then.
so I don't think we're talking about yielding to temptation. Yeah, because again, if the crave is yelling, my whole thing is how can we conquer it? That's the goal.
Well, you could talk to Jesus, or you could eat dirt, or eat tree. I mean, there's lots of things.
Don't think dirt would do it for me.
Hey, you are. I get grass sometimes. I'm like, well, cattle eat grass, deer eat grass. I mean, if I'm hungry enough, I'll eat some grass.
It wouldn't do you any good. We don't have the enzymes for it. But I think I hear what you're saying. Like we do need to be careful, and I'm thankful you're saying something. We don't want to enable the crave, right? We want to conquer the crave. We want to make sure that our decisions are based on something much higher and much more principled than my crave. Yeah, right. And I think for some people who are trying to overcome the crave, the carnal nature, that they do have to be more rigid and strict with themselves, right?
That's where I'm at right now.
Okay, yeah. I do, and that's where I was for a long time. I had to be really rigid and strict with myself until it became more habitual, and we're going to be talking about that tomorrow, yeah. Because I think that there are some really good practical strategies that we need to be able to implement in order to successfully conquer the crave. The next thing I want to share with you guys, and then I think it'd be great if we had a little bit of discussion before we end. The next one, and this is the last one, and then we're going to spend tomorrow on this one. How do we overcome appetite? when you guys went to school, did anyone teach you how to learn? Did anyone teach you how to memorize or how to like better incorporate the things that you were listening to in the classroom? Or maybe you were just good at learning. Maybe you could memorize quickly. Maybe you knew how to take notes somehow inherently, or someone taught you. But most of us, we don't know how to learn. And there are there's some great there's some people now who've made this their specialty. So they will go to like, I don't know, people who have to memorize lines for a movie or speeches for something, and they teach them how to memorize. They teach them how to use their brain better. They teach them how to, absorb a lot of information and how to store it. And when you listen to a lecture, how you can use your body to be able to imprint that kind of information on your brain. I wish I'd learned that when I was young. I think I could have learned a lot more and retained it if I had learned how to learn. Usually we just go and someone talks to us and we're expected to somehow know what to do with all that information. So kind of the same thing with this. When we go to people in the world and we say, oh, this is our health message. So it's the right arm. So what do we do with the right arm? We give health talks. We instruct them how to eat. We teach them maybe some new recipes. And I think recipes are probably the most practical strategies that we can, the cooking schools and that kind of thing. But I guess my approach in the past, because I love information, so I like to give information, right? But that doesn't always help people know how. So we're bombarding people with, oh, you got to change and this type of thing, but we haven't given them the tools of how to overcome. That's a practical strategy of learning how to cook, but people are dealing with the crave. They're dealing with their own innermost self, right? They're dealing with the propensity of the lusts of the flesh, the appetite, our carnal nature that we all have. This is just who we are. And if we don't recognize it, then I would suggest that you're not the person to help someone else overcome it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to recognize your own carnality in order to be able to help someone else identify theirs and find victory in Christ. And I believe that that is the only way we're going to truly overcome the crave. I think that there's a lot of people in the world who eat super healthy, like I said. They've overcome some tremendous temptations and made incredible changes, but maybe the crave is acting out in other areas outside of food. So this subject of how, I think, is really important. And again, I think we're really good at pointing at people and saying, change. And if that hasn't happened to you, I'm glad. Definitely happened to me in my experience early on. I was 19 years old, and sisters are bringing me to James Rafferty to give me Bible studies because she needs to learn how to change how she dresses. She needs to learn how to change how she eats. They didn't know I was in love with Jesus at that point. I was like, oh, I need to change. Okay, but we're good at trying to make people change, and we think that information is going to be the key to it. But again, I think it's much, much deeper. I'm going to end with this, believe it or not, and then we'll start with this topic again tomorrow, but I would like some discussion. Robin Williams, why would I be quoting from him? I think the saddest people, he says, always try their hardest to make people happy because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless and they don't want anyone else to feel like that. Is that why we're sharing with people the health message? Is that what's motivating us, that we want their happiness, that we want what's good for them, that we know what it's like to live in an unhealthy, crummy way and to feel yucky in our own skin and to not have the, completeness or the optimization. That was the word, optimal living. No, I want optimal living for you. I want you to experience the best version of yourself. And that's the only reason really why I'm here. Because I want you to experience wholeness in your body and in your mind and in your spirit. And this is the path. Let me tell you, I have tasted this. I've experienced it. It is so much better than all the cookies and chips and indulgence. No, this is where it's at. Because inherently, we feel sick after we indulge in that stuff. People are like, yeah, I craved that. I indulged in it. I felt horrible afterwards. Isn't that the truth? That's the reality of where our cravings and our attempts to satisfy our cravings lead us to. But there's something much better. And once we have that better, then hopefully, those of us who've been the sickest, who've been the most entrenched and in bondage to the crave in our lives, can hopefully offer something a lot better to people. Just like, and when I read this, I think, Robin Williams, are you identifying yourself as one of the people who've experienced a lot of sadness in your life, and therefore you don't want anyone else to have to experience it, so let me make you laugh. So, to be teachers of the art of living, I think, is one of our goals. And yeah, that's what we'll pick up tomorrow. Any discussion, comments, or thoughts on what we talked about?
You could teach a person how to garden so that they can raise more healthy food.
Yes, absolutely. That's such a great. She just said we can teach people to garden. Another really practical strategy of how we can help people live healthier. And James is a great spokesperson for gardening. We're super into it, and he's just gushes all about it all the time. And yeah, because we have experienced for ourselves something so beneficial. So then we want to provide that. Not that you should be gardening. No, man, we've experienced, just this incredible blessing from gardening and being in tune with what we're eating and the soil. And you should try. We got our neighbors to start gardening. They're like, you guys are doing, we want to start gardening. So they started gardening this summer, and we're sharing. We go over to each other's houses and watch stuff grow. And, it's just so fun.
And then you can compost and make your own soil.
Yep. Composting. She's just talking about composting. Was there a thought over here? Thought I saw a hand go up. Okay, anyone want to combat what I said? What do you guys think about this concept of the crave? Do you understand what I'm saying, that it's not just the thing, that it's not a verb, that it's not a I lust, I crave, but it's no, there exists within me the crave. Does that make sense to what, okay. All right, we will continue with this tomorrow, and hopefully you will be desirous of understanding, not just for yourself, but I think we need to have a clear awareness of this to be able to help other people. How are we going to overcome this crave that's within me that manifests in different ways? How can we truly become teachers of the art of living? I think we need to understand then the science of salvation, and in a really practical way, how we can help people overcome. All right, let's pray. Father in heaven, just so grateful that Jesus did overcome the crave on our behalf, that he experienced it fully, and that he has all power to meet each one of us where we're at. And I just pray that as we discuss these things, that you will speak to each one of us individually, and that you will equip us with light and truth that we can extend to those around us, to a world so desperately in need. It's my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.